Welcome to After the Shoot, a podcast where we take a peek behind the lens to get inspired by the stories, challenges, and ideas of some of the most successful photographers in the business. I'm Justin Benson from Aftershoot, an AI culling and editing software that helps give photographers like you your time back, so you can focus on what you do best while our magical unicorns take care of the most boring and time-consuming parts of your job. I'll be your host for this podcast, and I'm so excited to have you here as we talk with some of my favorite creators.
You shouldn't have your subject facing away from the light. Sometimes when the natural light is so good, that's where I'm like, I don't need to fire the flash. but more often than not, I'm defaulting to like, I'm gonna bring a flash out. I always try to get my shot that I have envisioned very quickly. If it's past 3 minutes, I feel like it's taking too long. Let the pose dictate the lighting.
Today's episode is all about Flash and YouTube. We're sitting with Francisco Joel Hernandez, one of the best YouTube instructors on Flash. I've personally learned so much from his channel. He breaks it down in such a simple and easy to navigate way, and I know that this podcast episode is going to be super insightful and give you a little hint of some of the amazing things you can learn. Enjoy the show. Welcome to After the Shoot. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So I start these things off the same way every time. And my biggest question is, how'd you get started in photography and kind of what was your journey through it?
I would like it to be a more interesting story, but I feel like it's usually the same way for a lot of people. The only difference is that I had nobody to help me, because I feel like sometimes it's like you learn it from like a father or grandfather. For me, I think I was a bit introverted growing up, and I think at some point around like 10 or 11, whenever I would accompany my mom to like CVS or Walgreens, I saw disposable camera, and I always had a little bit of an interest, and I would get a couple of disposable cameras like every so often, every couple of weeks whenever she would go. And you know, it was always interesting to capture kind of a scene, like a moment of time. So I think my initial spark was like that documenting kind of vibe, and then it kind of like was on the back burner because, you know, school, and in high school I kind of picked it up again because of the yearbook. But I was very fortunate to pick it up exactly where I did, because it was at a time where digital was just starting to get more like in the system, in the industry. And I had the Canon Rebel, I don't know, TI or something, one of those first ones. And I was just so in love with the fact that you can take a picture, see it, and if you don't like it, delete it, which you couldn't do with the disposables. So I think from there, I went to college, where I was just focused on my degree. And then immediately after I graduated, I was like, you know what? I want to learn this lighting stuff because it looks so good when I see it in different areas. And I was starting to kind of realize that a lot of things that I liked in terms of like magazines or, you know, promotional material for movies or TV, they use lighting in a way that I really liked, and I wanted to learn that and crack that code. And over some time, when I started to kind of feel like I was comfortable in that, then I made my YouTube channel and other, you know, kind of educational platforms like Instagram. They're not educational, you know.
I know what you're saying.
Start like that, but I kind of make my Instagram, make my Facebook into educational platforms so that people can learn. And I think it just kind of just steamrolled into that and led into other things.
That's
long
awesome.
answer. Sorry, guys.
No, that's exactly the answer. I mean, that's such an interesting journey. So it's so cool to see, you know, something that was kind of just something that piqued your interest or gave you a little passion, and it grew into something so big, and to the point that you can educate on it.
Yeah,
that's really like, you know, you cracked the code, and for me, so I studied film. I studied lighting for film, so I had the code.
Oh, see, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, so I had that like that head start, and I always I say like my first wedding I didn't use off-camera flash because I didn't know what I was doing. My second wedding, which was just a year later, it was entirely off-camera flash. So I was lighting my reception
so you were
and everything.
Like quick with it.
I understood the light. I just didn't have flashes. I didn't know why I needed the flashes. I understood the light, so I could do like natural light.
Yeah.
Because that's what I studied in film, was like what natural light is good,
we have opposite
what lighting
paths.
works. Yeah, so we kind of flipped it.
I tell people I learned the worst way, where I knew natural light, you know, was part of the process, but not to the understanding that I should have had with it. And I just felt like for example, I thought you needed to use the lights at full power, that's it. And so I would change my settings to that. And I don't even want to say the camera settings that I had, but like it'd be bright day, I'd be ISO 1600 on my Nikon D60 or my Canon 60D at that time. And I was just like, no. So you had a
We had the flip, yeah.
You had a flip.
I immediately knew lighting was super important, and I had to incorporate it in everything. But I had that good understanding of it, which I think is really beneficial.
For sure.
It helps your work stand out so much. I was just watching some of the photos that you've posted recently, and they're just so incredible. I noticed you've got such a knack for incorporating light and balancing it, and it's really funny to hear that you did not before.
Oh, the worst. That was the worst. Yeah.
So that journey, you were self-taught, and now you've really kind of devoted yourself to helping teach others.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's such a unique position to be in. Do you ever feel like there's kind of some backlash on it? Like, do you feel that?
I felt it very, very strongly when I was just starting to really figure out what kind of style I wanted to shoot with lighting. Whenever I would share online in different photography groups on Facebook, it was always met with backlash. Like, whoa, you shouldn't have your subject facing away from the light. You should have them facing towards the light so it's more realistic. And comments like that over time, I was just like, no. I like this kind of formula that I'm kind of just developing for my own stuff. And over time, it actually got to be very popular. I would say, to pat myself on the back, like I was very kind of like a bit of a original kind of content creator with the lighting and with the blurry background outdoors. Me and a few other people that I saw on these different photography groups on Facebook were kind of just like in love with that look. And right now, those other photographers don't even do that anymore. But I just kept with it. And I was like, I love soft light. I love to make that subject stand out with lighting, blur the background to also make them stand out furthermore. And I just always, had that in me where if I could get good at something, I want to help others, do that as well. Because there's so many people out there that just tend to gatekeep. And I always just did not like that vibe. I just felt like, are you scared? Are you that I'm going to take your business, or are you scared to just teach others? And I never had that in me. So as soon as I start to get better at something, I was like, hey guys, I just learned how to do this. I want to share it with you. And that was just the way that my mind worked. And that's why I started to educate more and more.
And
but there's
great.
Backlash.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that was a trick question because I know there's backlash. You just posted on Facebook, like probably 3 or 4 days ago, about somebody who said, "Why would you shoot at f1.4 with off-camera flash?" And but you've created a look for yourself, and I think it's a unique look, and it's beautiful and it's stunning. And so many people kind of, just feel the need to talk down towards other people or say my technique is better.
Yeah, do this, not that.
Yeah, exactly. And your look is your look. That's why people hire you. That's why you are who you are.
Yeah, it's crazy because I think it's kind of a similar note that when I was starting to learn more and I felt more confident, I would share more behind the scenes photos on different platforms. And a lot of people originally, like a lot of companies, didn't want to do that for, I think, the same kind of reasons. Like they're like, well, I have a course and I don't want to kind of spoil that course by showing them the light setup. And it originally started off like that. But then I think over the years, they started to see it as a good kind of advertisement, show the behind the scenes, but people still have questions afterwards. And then that's when we can sell the course. So it became something that I definitely felt that a lot of people were shying away for on purpose. For a reason, but then they started to think of it as a good way to advertise. So that was crazy. I did it just because I'm a visual learner and I wanted people to see exactly.
And understand.
Yeah, but then those companies changed their mind, flipped the switch.
So for people who don't use Flash, because I think there's a big subsect of the community who just, they're not, whether they're not comfortable, whether they're not ready to it. What would you say is like kind of the baby steps? Like how would somebody kind of get into it? Obviously they got to go watch your YouTube.
And that's a good, I don't want to promote my YouTube, but I was thinking of doing like a series on my YouTube channel where I talk about the basic camera settings, because for me, I didn't know those settings. I didn't know about my camera's meter until years after I bought my camera. And I remember that I was in San Antonio. I was leaving the store down the sidewalk. I picked up the meter and I was like, oh wow, what the, you know. But I think honestly, just starting with the basics is the best thing you can do. And that means like knowing exactly what shutter speeds, will do to your camera's exposure, the aperture, also known as the f-stop. See, so there's different things out there, guys. But just knowing the exposure triangle is honestly just the best thing that you can do, because once you learn those and master those, you can either stick to using natural light and seeing, exactly how you can adjust those settings to get different looks with just natural light. And then for me, I never liked limitations. So when I never liked the limitations, so whenever I start to get better with flash, I thought, okay, you know what? Even though there's harsh light and I want this background, when I use light, I can achieve this result without having to, suffer that poor lighting. So I just felt like that was just a great thing to do. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
And that's, I think, one of the coolest things about off-camera flash is that we are not tied when you have off-camera flash in your pocket. You're not tied to one situation. Sure. I oftentimes see images that I couldn't create without off-camera flash because the light is bad or the background is really nice, but I can't do something about it. And this is an easy way to kind of dive into that. Now, I'm going to take a stab at it, but I'm going to assume you're really into high-speed sync.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of people don't realize that one of the biggest reasons why I use high-speed sync to begin with is because even right now, I know it's because I'm not nervous, guys, but I have shaky hands sometimes. And, even before photography, I knew that my hands were shaking a little too much. And before any of the latest cameras had like image stabilization and stuff, I felt like that was a big thing that was causing my images to be slightly blurry. So then when I learned about, high-speed sync and what it could do, which is basically just allowing you to use a faster shutter speed than normal with flash, I was like, okay, cool, it'll help with that. But it also helps with using wide apertures, which I was really, accustomed to and I really liked for my own work. So it was kind of like a good dual feature for me, that stabilization and also just being able to use those wide apertures. But lately I've been using ND filters in my work. So I do tend to use those too.
Ah, that's very interesting. So you've got a wide mix. Would you deem yourself as a very technical person by trade, or is it something that you've learned through time?
When I do any sort of educational like videos and stuff, I always try to avoid technical speak, because I feel like when I was trying to learn, there was people out there that were just very technical, and it made me get frustrated and get disinterested, and just feel like that frustration was that bad feeling, that negative feeling was pulling me away from photography. And I feel like there's still ways to teach the same thing, but in a simpler terms. So whenever I make any sort of video, I always do my best to kind of give out the information so that anybody can digest it, even if they're not a photographer. I'll be like, oh, it's going to be this much stops brighter. That's a little technical, but I always try to keep it so that everybody can take in the information and learn, because I just feel like once it becomes complicated, that it's going to lose people. And I don't want people to kind of be disinterested in not just photography, but flash, because I love flash. So I do my best to just try to make it easy to digest.
It's an important skill to have. I think every photographer needs to know it.
Yeah.
Just to be able to know it.
Exactly. Yes,
whether or not you use it all the time. When I teach my courses, the introductory slide is, do I need flash? And that's the first question I have to ask when I walk into a scene. Is there really good natural light? Do I need to unpack a stand, put it on the softbox?
That's a very good question to start with.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know that if it's important to have it or not.
Yes.
And there's a reason to have it when you don't need it sometimes, right? You want to change the look of an image. But if you're, on a session and it's going to be more of a burden to have flash than it would be to just use the natural light, would you take out the flash?
Exactly.
And the second slide of that presentation is a picture of a frog. I found a frog in my backyard, like a tree frog. And I took this picture of this frog. And with natural light, it was a really good photo. Yeah. I, being the person I am, took out the 26-inch softbox and then lit the frog and made a photo that was no better than the natural light photo. Yeah. it looked different. And there was no reason for me to do that, but I did it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that question comes from. Is
True.
I probably risked scaring the frog. I did the natural light photo first,
Yeah.
but I took out that because I thought, I know flash and I can make a better photo. But you don't need it for everything, and knowing when to implement it and when not to implement it is important.
I'm glad that you made that a point in your presentation, because that's very true. For me, it's always a bit of a default to bring out my flash, even though like I know the light, like sometimes when the natural light is so good, that's where I'm like, I don't need to fire the flash. But more often than not, I'm defaulting to like, I'm gonna bring a flash out. But there are sometimes, my wife knows, because she's the one that holds my light, that sometimes I just I'm just very appreciative how that natural light looks. Like, it's just so good. Usually around golden hour, the peak, the tail end of it. Yeah, because like all the exposures are kind of like on the same level, so you get all the information from the shadows and the sunset. So it's like, I don't need my flash.
Yeah,
but I will get it in a little bit.
You may damage the image more by adding flash in, because then you're adding that hot point, or you've changed the dynamic. So your work is so natural. So it really, it doesn't look like you have flash in all of the photos, because the light is so soft, it's so balanced. It's inspirational, because I think a lot of photographers walk into a scene and say, oh, when I add flash, it looks like flash.
It looks like, yeah, true.
What's like the process to making it look more natural?
So a lot of people, I'll start off with like nighttime photo shoots, because I think that's something that a lot of people kind of, it's harder for them to grasp that, because you're doing the exact opposite of like the daytime. So for nighttime, you're really bringing up that ISO, slowing the shutter speed just a little bit, still using a wide aperture, but it's always a matter of kind of like a balance that I'm aiming for. So, and I know you're saying how to achieve the balance, but I'm like, oh, we'll balance it. But it's like, for example, if it's like a bright sunny day, you need a lot of power to kind of match that intensity. Or if it's, later in the afternoon where there's like less intense sunlight, like golden hour, the tail end of golden hour, because sometimes at the beginning it's still pretty strong. But you kind of just want to match the intensity with your lighting. So sometimes that can benefit you, because if you're shooting like at nighttime, for example, and you don't need a lot of power at all, like I just made a reel on Instagram where I was using my light, and a lot of people were like, oh, dang, that light must be really strong. I was shooting at night, so I didn't need much power at all. I knew I was like at 1/256, which is the lowest on that light. But a lot of people just kind of had this in their mind that, oh, you had it at full, like at a very high output. But I think people need to realize that sometimes when you're working with at night, because of that low intensity, you can adjust your settings so that you can use less flash, like just the tiniest bit. But it's going to be the opposite case in the daytime. Very bright sunlight, you want to match that intensity more, because for me, I don't like limitations. So if I want to, really kind of bring down that ambient, then I want to have that strong light to be able to adjust my camera settings to get, more of that subject in focus with that lighting. But it's always going to be about matching the kind of the ambient light that you're working in. I think that's pretty much the summary of it.
Yeah.
Sorry for the long answer again, guys.
That's good. So do you? I'm weird. Mm-hmm. So my presentation is it's not going to teach people how to use flash the way that most people will. Okay. Do you generally like take an exposure first of your subject and then add in flash afterwards?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I actually try to always do like one shot in, whenever I'm doing a photo shoot for educational purposes, to just take a shot without the light firing and then add the light, because I feel like for me, when I was seeing stuff, educational stuff, which wasn't very common at all in 2011 to 14 when I was learning, like I would see very rarely like a behind the scenes setup, but I was always curious, okay, what exactly is the light doing? So that's why I always try to take a shot without the light firing and then with the light firing. And if it's a multiple lights setup, I always try to take one with like different, just building on the lighting so that people can know exactly how it's, built, because I think that really helps them really kind of digest the information more. So
that's a good one. So I teach people the weird way. I do it all at once. So I found that when I walk into a room, I kind of know the settings. Like I could look at you and say, oh, I'm going to set my ISO to 500 and my shutter speed is going to be 1/200th of a second and I'll shoot at f2.8 and I'll get a rough exposure of you. And then I literally, without any more questions, I dive in. I don't take the test shot. I just set my settings and put the flash next to you and say, okay, I'm going to start in the middle. And I found for me, this learning style helped me a lot because I was able to understand the adjustments that I was making. They all coincide.
Yes.
So if I take that photo of you and you're too bright, I know I have to lower my flash power. But if I take that photo of you and the background is too dark, I have to make an adjustment to both the flash power and so because they are all tied to each other, my brain just wrapped itself around that concept a little bit better where, okay, subject's too bright, I'm gonna lower my aperture, but my background's too dark. Okay, so I can't do that.
I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think I usually, like my wife or whoever's with me at a photo shoot, I'm here like, okay, probably like 2.8, I'm at f2 now, so that means I need to adjust my ISO, that means the shutter speed, and if I'm using filter, then maybe just adjust it there. So I think it's like, what's it called? Like being able to kind of juggle different things, multitask is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I always prided myself in that feature.
Yeah.
Playing video games like Guitar Hero or DDR, where you have to see all the different things. But I always prided myself in that. So whenever I do a photo shoot, I always try to get my shot that I have envisioned very quickly. If it's past 3 minutes, I feel like it's taking too long. And I always just try to get that shot there because I pride myself in that ability to multitask the settings, the lighting, and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I do the same thing. I just don't usually vocalize it.
Got it. Yeah. So my entire like teaching process, my slides break down to that, where it actually is explaining the only modifications you can make, right? So if I were outside and it's full sun, my ISO is at 100. If I'm not using high speed sync, I'm at f16 or f12 or somewhere in that range, and my settings are set. That's it. The flash is at full power. When I take that first shot, the first test shot, there's only so many adjustments I can make. If my subject's not bright enough, I can only move my flash closer.
Yeah.
If my background is too dark, I can decrease the aperture a little bit, but now my flash is going to be brighter because I'm letting more light in. So I have to make multiple adjustments, but my mind just kind of always went that way. And I think, as somebody who's always worried about what people think.
Yes.
When I have a client in front of me and I take a test shot and it didn't work, being able to adjust it all at once makes it feel like it's a lot faster than if I'm like, oh, I took a test shot, now I'm going to add in the flash. Like, I'm worried my clients are looking at me like, does he actually know what he's doing? Or
I agree with you. If I were ever in a situation where they're like, take a good photo in less than a minute, then I'm like, okay, I would do exactly what you said. Like, all right, 2.8, ISO 100, 250th of a second, and maybe use an ND filter, maybe not. And I would do all that internally to just get that result right away. So I think, there's truth exactly to what you're saying.
Yeah.
You want to be able to just deliver right away.
I
like the challenge.
And not fear, not fear the client. Yeah. Because I think that's the important thing when you're getting started with Flash. If you fumble a little bit, I think so many of us just have that anxiety of like, they're watching me and I'm
in
not.
The beginning?
Yeah, they're watching me and I don't know what I'm doing and something's going to be terrible. So having that kind of in your pocket to speed it up, I think is really helpful. When it comes to your sessions, you obviously use a lot of Flash. That's by design, that's your style. Do you find that when you're doing Flash work, you're doing multiple poses in a location? Like, how do you really expedite it? Are you having an assistant that just follows people around?
So I don't know how other people work, but for me, whenever I'm working in a specific location, like a park, for example, I always try to arrive there early for one, and try to figure out like, okay, if I'm delivering 10 images, or depends, what you're delivering. If I'm delivering 20 images, then I'm like, okay, I want 6 different spots, maybe an average of 2 shots, like 2 winner shots in those spots, and then that's 12 images. Or if I want to aim for more images, then I would choose a little bit more locations. But a lot of people, whenever I need to make a video on this, but when it comes to like location scouting, I always keep that in mind. Like, okay, how can I get a lot of different types of images in this limited space? Like, hopefully it's not super limited, but I always try to keep that in mind. Like, okay, this many amounts of this different types of spots here in the same location. That's not too far. And also, I kind of try to keep it in a line so that you're not walking all the way over here and then over here, but then, oh wait, I saw something over here again. So I always try to keep it like, progress slowly towards, going
The final big one.
Yeah. So nobody's having to waste energy going in circles and stuff. But yeah, it's always in this location, this many spots, maybe 2 to 3 maybe shots in that spot, and then go to the next spot immediately after. And that multitasking comes in handy because I'm taking a shot and in this one spot, and I'm thinking about the next location.
Yeah.
So I'm always
you're already
thinking,
a step ahead on what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really cool. So this is like a chicken before the egg question. So do you, because you have these locations in mind, right? So when you go, you pre-scout, you kind of know where you're going to go. Yeah. Are you conceptualizing the pose, or are you placing the light where it's convenient and adjusting the pose towards the light?
It's a little bit of both, because I think that even if you knew exactly how the model looked like and the outfit that they're wearing and the colors and the lighting of the location, sometimes inspiration can hit you out of nowhere, and then like a light might shine through and you're like, oh, that looks cool, interesting. Or like, I think it was yesterday here in this spot when I was walking into the building, like a strong sunlight was hitting like a building and reflecting light, and I was like, oh, even if I had not thought about that or seen it, if it happened at the shoot, then I would probably incorporate it. So it could change. It could definitely change the vibe of a shoot with that random inspiration. But I do try to keep a good plan in hand, because it's just better than winging it. And there in my early stages of doing photo shoots, I was like, let me just wing it. And then I was comfortable enough to with posing and lighting that I could actually deliver a good image. But it just doesn't really deliver a lot of confidence in the subject when you're like, you're doing a lot of, I think, you want to be the opposite of that. So I think having that plan eliminates that, or at least reduces it greatly. So I think it's good to have that plan, but I do definitely let inspiration hit, especially when the subject does like a pose on accident. Like they might be sitting at this chair and then they do something like this, and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me try to use that. So yeah, I let inspiration hit me whenever it comes.
So, all right. So then in that case, are you putting your subject in position and then adding the light, or are you adding the light and then putting your subject in?
I always let the pose kind of dictate my lighting, because I feel like the pose and the expression are stronger than like the light. Obviously, lighting is extremely important, but I feel like good expression and matching the energy of that expression is equally important. So if you want to have, if the person is very has a very dramatic look to them, and you give them like dramatic pose, you don't want to do like a very evenly lit, very over,
very flat and boring.
Boring. You want to add, match that energy. Yeah. So I try my best to kind of let the pose dictate the lighting. And there's times where I work with a subject and I get a good shot like with them facing this way. And then she's like, oh, can I try this? And it's a great pose. And then I'm like, okay, I tell my wife, all right, Bevis, can you switch the lights? So because the main light was here, and if she's facing this way now, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more dramatic. Yeah. So I need that light to move. So I do definitely let the pose dictate the lighting. I definitely do that.
Oh, that's cool. This was such an interesting conversation. I mean, it's, I'm not a Flash nerd, I guess. I'm not calling you a Flash nerd either, but I'm, for me,
Spider-Man shirt.
but like, for me, I love lighting. I love Flash. I love technicalities of it all. But it's always nice to talk with someone else who has that same feeling and that same opinion, and kind of likes to play with light and do something unique. So it was really just an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Your YouTube is where all the good stuff is at.
Oh,
so that's where people need to go and tune in, and they can get the tutorials and walk through it and kind of
more
get a better
tutorials
understanding.
Are coming soon, guys.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's perfect. That's what everybody needs. So it is really, it's a fantastic channel because it is so educational. There's no gatekeeping or anything. So
no, never, ever.
And that's important because this industry, there is some gatekeeping out there, and it's nice to have, again, just another person in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
My knowledge is your knowledge, so let's all work together and share
I
it.
think the last thing I would say with that same note is that whenever I would see gatekeeping, it would probably kind of spark in me teach that with their gatekeeping. So I would like, no, I want to show them that. In one little series I have on my channel that I kind of put on the back burner a little bit, but it was building the shot. And I was showing every shot that I took at that photo shoot that got to that one final image that I really loved and shared online. Like I share all the mess ups that happened up to that point and exactly explain the settings, the thought process behind it, because I think that also helps with transparency. And I always try to be the person that I want to see out there, or be the change you want to see.
Yep.
So I feel like transparency is not as common. It's not as prominent in the field, in the industry, that I wish it would be. So I just try to be that change. Like I want to be transparent.
And you're and that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's why the hate comes, right? So that's how we started this. We can bookend this conversation with your honesty, your truthfulness. A lot of people present themselves as photographers who landed at the top and their images are top tier.
They never take a bad photo.
But we all take bad photos.
I know,
That's the thing. We all do. We all have a process. We all work through things. Yeah, exactly. I got a ton that are sitting on the computer that no one will ever see, but we all work towards an end goal. So I truly appreciate the time. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in to the next episode of After the Shoot. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to After the Shoot. Got any burning questions for today's guest, or just want to keep the conversation going? Drop us a comment if you're on YouTube, or join the After Shoot community to share your thoughts. You can find the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to get notified as soon as we drop the next episode. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you gave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're watching this podcast. See you next time.